Йоу!
This is the story of a man
Скоро.
named Stanley.
Что-то изменилось, интересно?
Stanley worked for a company in a
Шарики.
big building.
Но не изменилось, короче.
This is what
Пам-пам-парам,
all of his
пам-пам-пам-парам.
co-workers. Stanley picked up the
Опа.
bucket.
Ведро меняет прям все концовки, чат. Мне имеет смысл ходить в те, в которых я уже был?
Станley clutched
Да,
the
тогда
bucket
идем сначала в
tightly to his
стандартную.
chest.
Пам-пам-парам, пам-пам-пам-парам. Кладовка не открывается, чат, вы же видели.
Found
Опа.
one of them. One of the miniature Stanley figurines. Remember, no reward for collecting all of these, only the intrinsic pleasure of a job well done. You can't buy that sort of happiness, Stanley. God knows I've tried. So, I implore you to savor each and every moment you come across one of these beautiful figurines.
Дверь не дала открыться, а гузок, в смысле?
Crushed by the weight of this revelation, Stanley may have broken down into an emotional dumpster fire, if not for the soothing presence of the bucket. Even now, in his darkest of hours, did the bucket's warmth and guiding light pierce the dark clouds of confusion
Хорошо
and
загорим,
chaos.
спасибо.
It would be with him always. The bucket would. And he knew it. The two of them were inseparable. At this point, Stanley was so absorbed in the tender spiritual connection he shared with the bucket that he didn't notice the keypad behind the boss's desk. Nor in his bliss of simply being near the bucket did he have any notion that the PIN number for the keypad was 2845.
Ой, ошибочка.
Trying to input anything on the device was useless, but Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck. Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was the bucket guiding him? Yes, this is certainly the most logical explanation.
Фигурка была? Ну пофиг, найдем еще.
The elevator raced downward, plummeting towards an unknown fate. It would be all Stanley could do to keep himself together, if not for the bucket. Soothing him, comforting him, reassuring that in this darkest moment of uncertainty, he would be all right. The bucket is here for you, Stanley. Everything will be fine. Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read, Mind Control Facility. The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens.
Вкуснятина.
What horrible secret did this place hold?
Сейчас
Stanley
пойдет.
and The monitors jumped to life, and Stanley nearly dropped the bucket in shock. Everyone in the office was being videotaped, monitored like guinea pigs. The bucket had never seen anything like this, and it very nearly burst into tears as Stanley cradled it gently.
Алло, да, нам нужно переписать все диалоги в игре. Но добавить ведро, да. О, в натуре открылось. А че это у работника номер 28 там за красные буковки? Интересно. И... Окей. Допустим.
No! He couldn't accept his own life in someone else's control. Never! He squeezed the bucket. His one friend in the entire world. At this point, he could trust no one except for the bucket. But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he and the bucket would dismantle the controls for good. Two best friends, Stanley and the bucket, up against the world. They high-fived in a really cool way, and the bucket made a sassy comment about taking down the system. Stanley and the bucket waited in blackness. Was it over?
Ой, я донат, кстати, заметил.
Yes, done it. Stanley and the bucket had defeated their greatest and darkest enemy, freed themselves from the tyrannical grip of the evil mind control machine. Freedom was now mere moments away. Excitedly, the two of them began to discuss the kind of life they wanted to live once they stepped through this massive door. The bucket wanted to learn to roller skate. Stanley wanted to sneeze in every country on Earth. Both of them wanted to begin watching a movie, any movie, but then stop it halfway through and begin watching it in reverse from the end. True, it was a simple life they envisioned, but it was one they'd lived together, with one another to lean on, to trust, to support. What? Wait. What was happening? Why had the door stopped? Was Stanley and the bucket not about to be freed? An unbearable silence filled the room, lingering in uncertainty, until finally the truth hit Stanley square in the face. This building did not want the bucket to leave. Even the facility itself recognized the incredible calming presence of the bucket, needed the soothing warmth of the bucket, would go to any lengths not part with the bucket. No. Stanley can't leave this place, not while he has such a precious bucket in his arms. Not while this building has anything to say about it. Stanley realized he would never again leave this very room. But at least he has the bucket. To be trapped eternally in darkness isn't really so bad, Stanley thought to himself. As long as I have my bucket with me, right? I'll be okay, won't I? Stanley gulped. Very soon now, he was about to find out.
То есть хорошая концовка не является хорошей в этой
All of this,
версии.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room.
Интересно.
Perhaps Stanley
Ладно.
clutched the bucket tightly to his chest.
А почему
This
бы
was
и
not
нет?
the correct way to the meeting room. But Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? Was this better than the meeting room? Yes, Stanley thought. No, never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
Нет. Нет.
No,
Said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Go to the cargo lift.
Окей. Это все ведро реально, это не я.
Good.
Оно
Said the
влияет на
bucket.
меня.
Now ride the lift all the way to the top. There's something up there I need you to do.
Stanley did not question why or how this bucket was speaking to him. It should have alarmed him, of course, because buckets can't talk. But Stanley chose not to think about this obvious fact. He was firmly convinced that the bucket had spoken to him, and he unthinkingly did whatever the bucket asked.
Ведро рассказчик 2. Блин, очень много советов, ребят, остановитесь, перестаньте.
No, stop. Look there on the wall. You see, there's a sign right there. It says, "No buckets past this point." Stanley, how could you think it was okay to bring the bucket here? Unless, what if the problem is that you actually don't know what is a bucket and what isn't a bucket? I suppose that would explain a lot about your behavior up to this point. Which, if that's true, well, my goodness, I think we have to do something about it. This misunderstanding could have dire consequences on the entire rest of the game if not addressed quickly and properly. So much of the impact of the story is dependent on your understanding of what is and isn't a bucket. Please, step in here for a moment.
Да без проблем. Что такое ведро?
Now then, I'm going to run you through some test scenarios,
Спасибо.
and you'll tell me whether or not the thing I'm showing you is a bucket.
Окей.
Simple enough, right? This
Давай.
should tell us everything we'll ever need to know about what is or is not a bucket. Okay, let's begin.
Это правда, Таус.
Item 1. Is this
Ah.
a bucket?
Yes.
Incorrect. It is a hologram of a bucket, not an actual bucket. Item 2. Is this a bucket? Incorrect. It is a 3D printed recreation of a bucket, not an actual bucket.
Слабое звено.
Item 3. Is this a bucket? Incorrect. This is a bucket.
Кайф.
Item 4. Is this a bucket? Correct. This is a tractor and not a bucket. To be honest, I just sort of put this one in here as a gimme, but I was starting to get concerned that even this might be too much for you. Thank you for not making me look like an idiot. Okay, next one. Is this a bucket?
Нет.
Incorrect. This is a bucket.
Понял.
Item 6. Is this a bucket? Trick question. Both. Gotcha.
Что?
Item... Wait, hold on. I can't find the next one. Let me see. It should be around here somewhere. Yes. Thank you. There's nothing here. Of course it isn't a bucket. We both know full well that nothing isn't a bucket. Wait, when I say nothing isn't a bucket, that makes it sound like I'm saying everything is a bucket, which of course is not true. Unless... Is that what you think? Answer me straight, Stanley. Are you trying to tell me that you believe everything is a bucket?
Да.
You know what? I'm too confused to even sort it out. I've lost all sense of perspective. What is a bucket? What isn't a bucket? Mere moments ago I could answer these questions with confidence. And yet now I'm somewhat adrift. Do any of us
Вот вы
know what a
слабое
bucket
звено.
is? Am I a bucket?
Да.
Stanley, I can't keep doing this. I'm losing myself, and myself was all I ever had to begin with. I'm afraid the bucket is threatening to tear our relationship apart. I can't have that. I'm sorry. But I'm going to erase all buckets from the game
Не-не-не-не.
entirely. Okay, here we go. What happened? Is everything gone? Why did everything disappear? Wait,
Потому что все ведро.
was everything a bucket? Every single thing in the game was a bucket. Oh my God, I had no idea. How could... Except me. I'm not a bucket after all. And you, Stanley, you're still here. You're not a bucket either. Oh, this is wonderful news. We're not buckets. Yes, I actually feel much more at ease right now. It's delightful to get some clarity on that issue. But it doesn't change the fact that we haven't got a game. So, tell you what. I'll reset everything and we'll put back all of the buckets, okay? And we'll know that it's all a bucket. But if you run into anyone else, maybe don't mention that. Who knows what that information might do to a person? All right, here we go.
Окей.
The confusion and the chaos all seemed to melt away as Stanley
Lift.
embraced the bucket.
Я думаю, лифт.
The
Ведро может
door is
являться
left
отсылкой,
to
например, на
go back,
Half-Life.
and so the two of them
Может
detoured
быть,
through the
может
maintenance
быть.
section and walked straight ahead to the opposite door.
Очень даже может быть.
Oh, good Stanley, I'm glad you found your way here. I knew you'd find this
О
place
боже
eventually.
мой!
You see, your friends and I are concerned for you, Stanley. We've come together here because we care about you very much. It's this bucket you're carrying around everywhere. The bucket isn't even from the original Stanley Parable. It's just sequel content. We're the ones that matter, Stanley. Classic characters from the first game, like the Adventure Line and the Broom Closet. Because that's what fans want from a sequel. They want more of their favorite jokes, not this bucket that they've never seen before. Yes, I know I'm the one who gave you the bucket, but you're spending too much time with it. Don't you want another story involving the Adventure Line? We could make the Adventure Line go somewhere new. Yes, yes, that's what the fans want. Let's do it.
Окей, хорошо. Секунду, у меня есть одно дело. Не прокатит, да?
Whee! Look at that wacky line. Who knows where it'll go off to next? Oh, and it played some silly music as well.
Опа. Let's go! Пам-пам-парам. Пам-парам-пам-пам-пам.
Now this is what the Stanley Parable is all about. Don't you remember all those great jokes from the original dialogue? Also, Stanley is addicted to drugs and hookers. Yes, it's as classic now as it was back then. Let's do it for the fans, Stanley. Let's give them more content exactly like this. But if we want to do that, you're going to have to give something up.
Так.
Don't you get it, Stanley? We need to get rid of the bucket. That's why I'm very proud to introduce a brand new character. This is the Bucket Destroyer. I think it'll make a wonderful new addition to the rich lore of the Stanley Parable. True, it also was not in the original game, but it's such a well-fleshed-out character with so much personality that to me it already feels as though it's been part of the cast all along. Don't you agree? Can you guess what the Bucket Destroyer does? Surely you don't need me to spell it out for you. Go ahead now, Stanley. Say goodbye to the bucket, and then pop it into the machine when you're ready.
Похоже, у меня нет выбора.
Now listen to me. It's crucial that you give it the bucket. I don't know what the Bucket Destroyer will do if it can't destroy your bucket. Destroying buckets is all it knows. That is its singular personality trait. Sure, I can hear you saying, how does a character with only one personality trait deserve to join the pantheon of beloved Stanley Parable characters? Well, you see, if you were to really explore the Bucket Destroyer, you would see that its desire to crush buckets is so densely loaded with complexity and nuance that it's really like 10 personality traits. What other object in this game can you even say that about? The broom closet? Certainly not. I wonder what sort of Bucket Destroyer merchandise the fans will be clamoring for after this. Okay, the Bucket Destroyer is getting very upset now. You'll have to hurry and feed it. We can't get back to the classic Stanley Parable characters like the Adventure Line or the Bucket Destroyer until you crush that damn bucket. Quickly now, the fans are waiting. Do it, the fans, Stanley. Give the fans what they want.
Как же
Hurry
оно
and
трясется.
The Bucket Destroyer. My prized creation. You had so much potential. We were going to do such marvelous things with you, tell such spellbinding stories about you. All of it squandered now. Goodbye, new friend. For the moment in time that you were here, you were magnificent.
Окей.
All of this
Сейчас разобьемся, там посмотрим, что делать. Пока мало идей. Музейную может? Может быть. Ну, сейчас подумаем. Тоже ведро? Не, уничтожать ведро я не хочу. Так я был в комнате, куда нельзя с ведром. Я ж только что оттуда.
said the bucket.
Don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else.
But Stanley feared that any path he walked might lead to the separation of himself and the bucket, his dearest friend. So he threw himself to his death, that they might die in one another's arms. How deeply touching.
Опаньки.
All of his
Ну, в офис.
collected, Danny decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Ты был с
He'd
ведром в
never
конце
be alone
времен.
again.
Конец времен это же... Блин, я не помню, как выйти на конец времен. Как найти статуэтки? Кстати, статуэтка. Она в комнате с лифтом, по-моему, да? Или нет, она в комнате с шефа. Доверяйте инстинкту, ну, короче, собирателя всего, понимаете, да? Закрыли в саму комнату, куда нельзя с ведром, ты зашел в комнату рядом, где трактор был. Да, но меня и не пустят с ведром в комнату без ведра, разве нет?
Oh, Stanley, can you feel it? The broom closet. It wants the bucket. You can feel that, can't you? The aura of jealousy. It's as clear as day. This
Я
broom
понимаю, что конец времен это когда на кнопку пропуска нажимаю Авакус. Как выйти на эту концовку, ты помнишь? Мне кажется, что ты на нее выходишь, когда ты проходишь в дверь новый контент, а я уже в ней, поэтому я не могу найти ее в ней. Я не могу, типа, я правильно помню, чат? Типа, я не могу найти эту концовку. Я в нее не попаду, ее не существует здесь.
closet believes it deserves the bucket. I can really feel it now. It's a bucket. It belongs in a broom closet. That's what the broom closet is trying to say here. It's supposed to go with the other cleaning supplies. Good for you, Stanley. Don't give in. Don't hand over the bucket. I know how hard it must be, given the pressure that the broom closet is putting on your shoulders right now, but you have to be strong. This is your bucket. This is your companion and lifelong friend. You can't hand it over. Oh, no. We're getting into name-calling now, it seems. Is this how low the broom closet has sunk, that it has to resort to this stream of petty insults simply in order to get you to hand over the bucket? Stanley, I never liked this broom closet for a variety of reasons, but even this is worse than I had imagined. And wait, now the broom closet has the gall to imply that you and the bucket are not truly deep and lasting friends? That your relationship is purely superficial and convenient? that your life is so banal and meaningless that you'd feel the same sort of kinship towards any inanimate object which happened to lay in your path in an even partially enticing manner? Well, I never. Go on, Stanley. Lay into it. Really tell the broom closet off for its demeaning comments. Expand on the wide variety of experiences you and the bucket have shared together. Go through each of them point by point. Share your journal entries detailing the rich emotional landscape of your feelings for the bucket as they have changed and evolved over the years. Let him have it.
Ты чё, нытик, что ли? Ты еще заплачь здесь.
Спасибо за 65, петушок. В жопе лазил, свет горел.
Okay,
What?
I've got you something which I think will help settle this
Это связано со Стэнли Парабол или нет? Так,
debate once and for all. Here
надо
we
дослушать
go.
этот разговор. В окно с ведром? Ну, я знаю, что с ведром
Now
будет
it's
другое,
settled.
да, потом...
No more debate,
Сгоняем,
no more
может.
discussion. Take our hike, broom closet, with all your meandering philosophical diatribes about the nature of cleaning supplies and their relationship to broom closets in the natural order of things.
Все, я иду, наклейку получил. Или все.
All right, I've got a second sticker
Oh,
back here, and I'm
две.
going to slap it on as well because I think it's appropriate. You see? I feel that it works.
Как он наклеил
because
ее
the
под
sticker is
первую наклейку?
also a bucket.
Вы видите?
That way, if you're ever unsure whether the thing you're holding is a bucket or not, you can look down at this sticker and say to yourself, ah, it's a bucket. There really is a wide variety of applications for
Да,
this
титунги,
sticker.
3 раза. Неиграбельно, рефанд, именно. Это не годится никуда, абсолютно.
You know what? I could take the name-calling and the dismissal of your kinship with the bucket, but now the broom closet is just giving us a silent treatment. And to be honest, I'm sick of the pettiness on display. You can stay here all you like, but I've had it with this impetulant room of cleaning supplies. Easily the most childish such room I've ever been in. I'll see you outside, and we can get on with the story about you and your bucket.
На меня появился наклейка с ведром, что делать? Получается, это ведро. Вообще-то он не может наклеить под другую наклейку. Это неправильно. Fair! Но законы физики работают иначе. Вниз? А почему вниз? Внизу фигурка. Да пофиг на фигурки, я не буду их все собирать. Фигурку я могу забрать и в нормальном... Как вы не понимаете, чуваки? Я сейчас не на нормальном рауте. Вы это помните? Я сейчас на рауте, который меня привел сюда за счет смерти в яме. Вам это понятно? Я проходил на концовку лифта с ведром. Другой офис — это рандомный ивент при рестарте.
Yes. This is
А,
certainly the most logical
серьезно?
explanation.
Кринж. Ну хоть забрал вот это говно.
Another miniature Stanley figurine. This, you know, there really must be a snappier name for these things. What about mini stands? Stanley figs? What about Stanlerines? Yes, I think I like that. Another Stanlerine under your belt.
Окей, тогда можем сделать концовку с лифтом. Или, нет, концовку с побегом. Концовку с победом. Со спидран игры пошел, ребята.
Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read, Mind Control Facility. Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was
Статуэтка
that
похожа на
at
отца
the end of
Джимми
this
Нейтрона.
hall, Stanley and
Неправда.
the bucket would both meet a violent death.
Хотя, может, носом. Не вижу.
Forward into a
What's that?
very painful death for each
В
of
чем
them.
дело?
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley and the bucket inched closer to their demise, Stanley reflected on how meaningless the bucket's warmth and comfort had turned out to be. To be sure, it puts the mind and
Спасибо за
ease to
поддержку.
embrace the bucket, but what use is a sense of
Всё
ease
круто,
when you're
всё
about to
здорово.
be crushed to death? This is what Stanley thought to himself, and he sort of kicked himself for wasting so much time carrying a bucket everywhere. Farewell, Stanley.
Ага.
Farewell, Stanley, cried the narrator, as Stanley and the bucket were led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, the bucket's life came to an end, as it was crushed violently to death.
Это типа четверной слом четвертой стены? Или почему рассказчик меняется? Не понимаю.
It was a shame, the death of such a magnificent bucket. It's true that all buckets are radiant in their own way, but this one stood above the rest. It was a glorious bucket to behold.
Ведро приглашает вас на большую выставку. Вы подошли к порогу настоящего знания. Как и само ведро, человеческий разум зачастую всего лишь пустой сосуд. Но с помощью таких средств, как эта выставка, разум наполняется смыслом и познанием. Знание о ведре и его истории — единственная непреложная истина в переменчивом мире. Возьмете ли вы с собой во внешний мир то, что узнаете здесь? Откроете ли разум тому, что может показаться сложным или даже невыносимым? Поменяете ли вы свою жизнь, жизнь своих близких после этой выставки? Или отвернетесь и будете жить, как прежде, в невежестве и темноте?
Can you see how arrogant it was for Stanley to take a bucket like this and to claim it for his own? Can you see the hubris that blinded him? Can you see that the bucket is far more noble than Stanley will ever be in his short life?
Ведро с двумя ручками. Представлено с двумя ручками. Сразу в реальной жизни такой дизайн ни разу не используется. Его представляет слишком опасным и безрассудно новаторским. Каждый год в нескольких странах казнят тех, кто пытается его реализовать. Это bucket despair? Может быть. Адское ведро! Ага, люди гибли сотнями тысяч, но один факт остается, ни у кого власти нет над ведром.
No man can own a bucket, and certainly not a bucket as dazzling to behold as this one. It is man who should kneel before the bucket.
Висящее ведро. О, это что, бесконечная дыра? А, меня в нее не пускает. О!
There is something we can do. Something we can do together, you and I, that will right this terrible wrong.
Окей.
Let Stanley die. Let him be crushed by the machine.
Странная
Don't
концовка.
reset the game. Don't give him another opportunity to run off with another beautiful bucket. We can save the world's buckets from their treatment as tools and implements if only we let Stanley die together. The bucket shall take on
Выключай
place as
игру.
ruler, as leader, as commander of a new world, a new vision.
Окей, чат, расскажите мне про вашу самую любимую концовку. Ну ладно, не расскажите про нее. Расскажите, как до нее добраться. Я могу сгонять пока в окно, а после окна надо придумать, куда идти. Из тех, которые с ведром. У младенца я был уже. Концовка с лестницей. Концовка с обманом двери. О, кстати. А концовка с обманом двери — это капсула спасательная или что это? Я не помню. О-о, есть.
Yes, whispered the bucket into Stanley's ear.
We've done it. We've escaped from that dull office and that pesky narrator. At last, out here in the white void, we are alone. Now, and for the
Концовка с
first
щитами.
time, I
Концовка с
can
щитами здесь не получится.
reveal to you my true self.
The bucket began to tell Stanley of its life and its history, of the countless wars it witnessed, desecrating the land and lives of untold numbers of innocent humans, and the bucket's own complicity therein, of sadness and regret, and the many years it spent dwelling on the actions it might have taken to curb the madness and the decay, if only it had been stronger, of hope and redemption, and its crusade to uplift the stock of life for the common man, to manifest justice where none existed, and the bittersweet reality of time, to see one's dreams and wishes met halfway, meted out in parcels like charity, and abandoned as soon as the warm glow of inspiration begins to dim. The opportunities to do so much more. There was so much it could have done, perhaps, the bucket wondered to itself. Perhaps if it had seen its own darkness with a clearer perception. This was way too much for Stanley.
What are you talking about?
He screamed.
You're a bucket.
To this, the bucket furrowed its brow.
No,
Said the bucket.
not since the evil wizard Gambhorata first ensnared me in his machinations as payback for the sacred amulet I stole from his
Какая же там
treasured
история?
vaults. I was young back then and could not conceive the ramifications of... No!
Stanley screamed even louder this time.
This is stupid! You are a bucket! This is so stupid! Why are we even doing this?
As Stanley screamed and screamed and screamed, the bucket revealed its true form, transforming into a mighty beast of untold power, its fangs glistening like... My God, Stanley, you did it. You saved us from the bucket. Thank God you already had all 12 emblems of sages and knew the incantations to summon their true power.
Страннейшая
Otherwise, we would
концовка.
have easily been overwhelmed by the bucket's power. I'm speechless. You've demonstrated such bravery here today. Come, let's restart the game, and we'll agree to never again go trifling with this bucket. nor the dark magic cast away inside of it.
Страннейшая концовка. Так, спасательная
How
капсула.
wonderful.
Как
Stanley was
получить
alone.
концовку спасательной капсулы из Will?
Finally,
Выйти из
tightly to
двери
his chest.
начальника. Точно,
Entered
да,
the door
отлично.
on his left.
Эту дверь нам плевать, а вот на эту нам не плевать. Ну, нет!
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned. Stanley
Концовка
clutched the
лифта с
bucket
ведром
tightly
была
to
уже.
his chest
Если
and
нет, то
entered
там
the
просто
door on his
надо на
left.
лифте туда-сюда поесть.
Я знаю эту концовку, да, с ведром еще не делал. Спасибо за $2. Ну, может, сейчас, если я дверь не смогу затриггерить с первого раза, опять посмотрим ее.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office.
Линия с ведром была. Эвил, все линии с ведром. Какая линия с ведром?
Stepping into his manager's office,
Ладно, щас
Stanley was
посмотрим-
once again stunned
посмотрим
to
лифт.
discover not an
А,
indication
желтая?
of
Да-да-да,
anything
была,
alive.
была. Будет интересно, но так как я уже видел, весь сюжет получилось скучно. Ну, блин, сюжета тут дофига на самом деле. Мне в целом нравится, как получилось. В плане какой мере и так далее. Интересно, куда же все-таки
Wait,
пропали
Stanley
работники.
said to the bucket. Can we go
Это
back
раскрывается?
up?
Это
When
раскрывается в игре, чат? Просто да или нет? Да или нет? Не говорите, что именно, типа.
I was pressing those keypad buttons, there was something very intriguing about the number 3. I want to go back so I can try pressing the number 3 again.
Он верит в
Bucket
работников?
said nothing.
Нет, вроде бы. Нет. Печально.
Here we are, said Stanley. Now I'm going to try out that
Когда ты
number
включаешь машину, тебе рассказчик говорит, или это не считается? Ну, вообще да, кстати.
3 button. He took the bucket over to the keypad and began absolutely slamming on the number 3 over and over and over. Wow, he said. The number 3 is such a special button. I'm having the time of my life. Stanley looked expectantly at the bucket, but the bucket remained silent. This was a shock to Stanley, who had always felt such a connection with the bucket. How was this not as exciting to the bucket as it was to him? Once Stanley had had enough of the number 3,
Okay.
he got back in the elevator. Perhaps the bucket had missed something. Perhaps it had
В
not
этой игре
seen how
меньше всего
much
геймплея.
joy Stanley
Мне
got
тоже.
from slamming the
Я
number
не знаю, каждая игра у меня проходится гораздо длиннее,
We
чем у всех.
repeatedly.
Я не знаю почему, причем. Я максимально пытаюсь все спидранить. Ну, типа, максимум я рассмотрю локации, потому что они красивые, но в остальном я просто пробегаю, и я все равно медленнее всех в 5 раз. Надо валил рот о том, что другие
said
пройти на
Stanley
всякие
to the
штуки для
bucket.
самой
You
игры.
can't go on yet. Not
But
till
the
you
Black School
understand how
Companion.
much the number 3 means to me.
Интересно.
You and I have been through so much together, and I just want you to see what I see. Feel the happiness
Тоже, да,
I
Пелигвин
feel.
было, да.
He
Понял.
smiled at the bucket, and the bucket said nothing.
Да, Шиза концовка с ведром я еще не смотрел, посмотрим, потом посмотрим. Мне сейчас интереснее всего другая концовка, конечно, но... Я не могу ее выбить из
Here we
дверей
go, said
дурацких.
Stanley. This time I'll really show you. He ran to the number 3 and began to wail on it like a musician on a beloved instrument, weaving a concerto of truth and passion. He wielded the number 3 like a fine artist would wield a paintbrush. He told stories through the number 3, stories of his dreams and hopes and fears. And the whole time, he looked to his bucket
That
for
chat
a
lol.
reaction of some kind. Anything to let him know that the bucket appreciated what he was doing. The bucket conveyed absolutely nothing at all, only silence. Crushed by a wave of dejection, Stanley returned to the elevator.
Страннейшая концовка пока что. Я жду какой-нибудь годноты в конце, иначе это скучно.
Stanley and the bucket were so close. They'd always been there for one another. Why suddenly could the bucket not connect with this passion of Stanley's? The question caused Stanley to ruminate the whole way down the elevator. He knew that there must be a way to get through to the bucket, to communicate fully with his dear friend. Surely there was a solution, mustn't there be?
Как ты вышел на это? Теребил лифт.
Ah, said Stanley. I know what to do. I know how to fully express this feeling in my heart. He decided right then and there that he would hold
Опа,
a press
пресс-конференция.
conference where he would speak to the public on all matters relating to pressing the number 3 over
Ну
and over.
допустим.
He would elaborate fully on what the number 3 meant to him and why he felt so alive when pressing it. Then the bucket would be able to
Порвались
see his
мини-горка.
joy through the eyes of others. It would get to see the world react to this discovery of Stanley's. And it would be through the public eye that the bucket would finally understand Stanley's work. For months, he advertised and marketed his press conference, building excitement around it,
Никто не придет,
developing and
скриньте. Я
rehearsing
уверен,
it,
что никто
until
не
it
придет.
couldn't be refined a single measure further. When the big day arrived, Stanley
Это
was
Майнкрафтский
as
звук двери.
prepared as he'd ever been for anything in his life. This was
3-3-3-3.
it. One last chance to win the bucket over.
Поехали.
One opportunity to share a true
Чувак, который придумал
connection with a
пиццу.
loved one. There was
Ха,
no
я
one
же
here.
говорил.
Nobody had come to the press
Как
conference
же я
to hear
прочитал.
Stanley speak,
У него не было ни единой причины говорить про маркетинг, если бы кто-то пришел.
to listen to him
Как
talk
только
about
было это предложение, я сразу понял.
what it really means to press the number 3 on a keypad over and over. He was unloved, uninteresting, he was a failure, and in that moment Stanley knew that the bucket would never again take him seriously. There would be no connection, no deeper understanding. The bucket merely sat there in his arms, indifferent. And so it began that slowly, over many years, the two of them grew more and more distant. They spoke less and less, neither wishing to state the obvious, that any sense of real respect between them had eroded since that day at the press conference. There would be no more games, no more long conversations about passion and pursuit, only a silence that consumed the space between friends. And Stanley, having for once in his life discovered the warmth and comfort of true companionship, was cast back into the unremarkable normalcy of loneliness.
Окей. Шиза концовка, потом дверь до победного траем. Вот это мой план.
All of his co-workers were gone.
Вот это мой
What could it
план.
mean?
Шиза это какая? Вниз лестницы. Стоп, ведро забыл. Я хотел бы глянуть только самые крутые, если честно, потому что я уже немножко подутомлен всей этой
Coming to a
историей.
staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked
Вот.
upstairs
Я думаю,
to the
что-
boss's office.
Опа.
Okay, I'm going back to the name of these little Stanley figurines, and now I'm torn between Stanlerines and Figlies. What do you think, Stanley? What name better encapsulates the intrinsic sense of happiness that you get from seeing a small number in the corner of your screen go up by one? Let me sit on it. I'm sure it
Чуваки,
will
читы
come to
нельзя
me.
повязать в этой версии. Концовка с телефоном, как мне, довольно крутая, с ведром. И как в ней
But
попасть?
Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility
помню.
of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy.
How long тебе рисует скорость прохождения сцены, которые вводят сами игроки. Некоторые могут посчитать, что прошли Stanley Parable после нескольких концовок, а некоторые после нахождения всех. Ну, да, в целом
Something
логично.
occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am
Идешь в правую
crazy.
дверь, едешь на лифте,
He
вынимаешь
looked down at the
телефон.
bucket in
О,
his
понял.
arms.
Будет.
Am I crazy? He asked the bucket. The bucket returned his gaze, but said nothing at all.
Сделаем.
That's strange, Stanley thought. Usually the bucket is a source of guidance and wisdom
Тогда
for
сначала офис босса, и потом телефон сделаем.
me in difficult times such as these. He held the bucket
Концовка,
close,
кстати,
yet
вообще не
felt
изменилась с
none of its
безумием. У него
familiar
абсолютно тот же самый
reassurance
текст,
and
что в прошлый
comfort.
раз.
And that's when Stanley realized, this isn't my bucket.
А, ну вот.
It's just a normal, everyday bucket. Someone else's bucket, perhaps. How did I end up with someone else's bucket? This is all terribly wrong. Surely no good would come from this. Who knows what sorts of bizarre
Ну, выброс в ведро.
hallucinations Stanley might experience without the psychologically grounding presence of his bucket. And indeed, now he noticed the rooms were repeating, which was, of course, very odd. And now he felt himself floating off the ground. Oh, gracious, he exclaimed. Without my bucket, I've gone truly mad. Where is it? I must find it. Far off in the
Буду
distance
ходить
now,
спиной
he
по
heard
приколу.
it calling to him.
Stanley! Stanley, it's me, the bucket.
Could it truly be? He rushed forward from room to room, passing by one bucket after the next. None of them were his. None of them were his special bucket.
Блин,
Come to me,
золото.
Stanley, find me.
He had to find the bucket. He had to return to his old friend. It was the only way to truly restore his sanity.
Погодите.
And then suddenly, he froze dead in his tracks. He knew where the voice of the bucket had been coming from. The real bucket was inside of him all along.
Возможно, реально ведро — это
It
наша
was
дружба.
incredibly painful. Stanley doubled over in agony and blacked out.
Ой-ой.
This is the story of a woman named Mariella.
Умер мужик.
Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, picked up her bucket of
Будет
comfort and
валяться с ведром,
security, and
возможно.
walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town, talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. Right away, she knew what the problem was. This man had no bucket. Of course, he'd gone mad, ranting and raving about
конечно,
an narrator
уверенность, не ведро
describing
это,
all
но
of his actions
окей.
and how everything is predetermined and free will is an illusion and it's all just a video game. It could all have been prevented if only he'd taken his bucket with him. Perhaps he didn't even realize
Герой,
he'd
главный
forgotten
герой.
his bucket at home in the first place. How cruel the world can be, Mariella thought, and she hugged her own bucket even tighter. But of course, she had no time for this. There were a myriad of confusing problems she would soon have to confront at work, for which her bucket would provide absolute guidance and total clarity on everything. Heck yes,
Он
she
все
thought to
еще
herself.
проходит
My
кольцо.
life
Да, привет,
kicks
Викус.
ass.
Прохожу. Спасибо
And
большое
she
за сотку.
backflipped
Спасибо за
all
донат.
the way to work.
Плюс поддержку. Как попасть на дно ямы под платформой с мостиком? Там еще есть концовка. Дно ямы под платформой. Что? Дно ямы
When
под
Stanley
платформой.
came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left.
А, не знаю, как туда попасть. Вообще 0 людей. Не был там ни разу. Так, сейчас надо не заруинить. Блин, ведро. Да, сейчас нужно не заруинить. Сейчас нужно не заруинить этот самый...
My God, the bumpscosity in here is absolutely
Дверь у
overwhelming.
босса нужно не заруинить.
The bucket made Stanley want
И
to
все
be a better
получится.
man.
Главное не обосраться с дверью босса. Если заруинишь, упади в яму с мониторами. Ну давай.
Stepping into the manager's office,
Как это сделать? Я не понимаю.
Stanley had never seen the office this
Надеюсь, потому
brightly
что у
lit.
тебя 1000
Was it a
популярности,
sign of
круто.
something? He hoped it was. Not everyone is
Минусов
so
не
lucky
вижу.
to have a
Пробуй
bucket.
концов с правой двери, прямо там, где мостик, но не
Stanley
лифт.
clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door
Но
on
не
his
лифт,
left.
а слева по маленькому мостику в вентиляцию. What? Правая дверь, платформа, с платформы
Coming
подальше
to a
вниз на
staircase,
перья, еще
Stanley
вниз, и
and the
там будет
bucket
лифт,
walked
насколько я
upstairs to
помню.
the boss's office.
Блин, как же много там всего, это жесть. Не, Филугос, ты прикалываешься? МБ тебе после грузовичков и возможного зафайноваться, пойти на ППЛ и чекнуть, что тебе принесли? Типа, ты представляешь, что, типа, во сколько это будет? Я даже файнал сегодня не успею, мне кажется.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley would...
А дальше? Оно открылось. Пришел к одной мысли, что сегодня сначала и ты, и чат веселый, им нравится игра, но потом она начинает надоедать. Можно все же делать игру, делить на 2 дня. Ну, может быть. Хз. Посмотрим. Это от игры же просто еще очень сильно зависит, на самом деле. Жаль, что тогда не пройдем концовку с включенным контролем разума. Как я ее проходил? Или она с ведром прям сильно меняется? Просто, типа, если там одна фраза, то это не сильно. И, типа, даже если там просто фразы, это не очень сильно. Сильно? Ой, ну ладно, сделаем несколько еще. Блин, с включением, с другой стороны, долгая концовка. Может быть, завтра просто дотыкаем те концовки, которые мы хотим. Типа, сейчас я допройду вот эту и телефон, потом грузовички, и завтра остальные концовки.
Да, я пробовал.
Оговорился? А сколько? Просто 19 АБ. А, окей, понял. Вопросов не имею. Вопросов не имею. И это все, ради этого я проходил эту концовку, окей.
Stanley knew the office layout like the
Ладно.
back of his hand. It was only a matter of time before he found the others, wherever they were. Just a matter
Ой.
of time.
Возможно, я заруинил игру. А что делать?
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door
что
on his
делать?
left.
Она вернется в следующем?
He hoped it was. He hoped very much. And try not to lose this one too, you dolt.
Нифига себе. Ты уже сам не
Stanley
можешь,
had
да?
felt the bucket
Не
calling to
могу.
him. Was
Не так
simply the
вспомнил,
place
лучше
to
показать
be.
с тайминга. 5-10, что это?
Stanley for the first time understood true happiness. Then the feeling went away.
О, ничего себе.
Ну,
А
так
это
как
не
лучше
эта
вообще
игра.
активировать.
Это оригинал.
Standing now in this incredible room,
Ф? Да, мне кажется, этого нет в Ультра Делюкс. Он там паркурит, по лифту какому-то едет, что-то там в консоли. Короче, ладно. Это нереальная пасхалка. Ладно, это не важно. У меня... Куда я иду, я забыл. И мне нужно до конца проехаться на лифте, правильно?
Stanley took the door on his left.
Я не помню
to go
такого
back
ни в
to the
прохождении, ни в
meeting
Вики, ни в игре. Я вроде помню это в оригинале.
No,
said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room.
Иди в
Go
комнату с
somewhere
погрузчиком и
else.
осмотрись.
The cargo lift,
Это
yes.
комната с погрузчиком.
Good.
Said the bucket.
Now ride the lift all the way to the
Погодите.
top. There's something up there I need you to do.
Stanley did not question why or how this bucket was speaking to him. It should have alarmed him, of course, because buckets can't talk. But Stanley chose not to think about this obvious fact. He was firmly convinced that the bucket had spoken to
Спрыгни
him,
вниз.
and
Если
he
я спрыгну вниз, я
unthinkingly did
умру.
whatever the bucket asked.
Go
Мы
into
сейчас в
this
любом
dark
случае идем на
room over
другую
here.
концовку. Так что
Stanley once
пофиг.
again obeyed blindly.
Я отвечаю, да?
Now pick up the phone.
Said the bucket.
Pick up the phone, and it will take us back home, where we can go about life together.
Я просто ведро
This
могу
is
бросить,
the
когда
sad
захочу.
story of a man named Stanley and his bucket.
Ого.
Once upon a time, I gave Stanley a bucket because I thought he was lonely and could use a friend. And then, very distressingly, he began to believe the bucket could speak to him.
Привет, Стэнли, это я ведро. Нажми П, чтобы взять меня на работу.
The Stanley Parable Reassurance Bucket was merely meant to provide the comforting glow of companionship. It doesn't literally talk and give you orders. Whatever Stanley is hearing the bucket say to him is just in his head.
Нажми В, чтобы взять меня домой.
Lately, I've been concerned about him. Wouldn't you be concerned as well? To see him delusional like this, obsessing over an inanimate metal object? I want to say something to him, but I don't know how I can convince him. I don't know if he'll listen to me.
То я, чтобы вернуться на работу.
Oh, I'll try anyway. Stanley, can you hear me? Listen to me. It's just a bucket. It can't think, it can't talk. All it will ever truly do for you is effectively transfer a liquid from one location to a different location. That's it. It doesn't do anything else.
Не слушай громкого человека, нажми О, чтобы мы пошли домой.
You see, he's not listening. He's still taking orders from the bucket. You know, once upon a time it was me he took orders from. Me he trusted and listened to. Now all he cares about is his awful bucket. This stupid hunk of metal.
Нажми, чтобы игнорировать всех, кроме меня.
It's sad. I suppose he doesn't need me anymore. From now on, he's just going to cling to this bucket, this cold, empty bucket, this sort of shiny bucket. Well, I'll give it this. The bucket does have a nice shine to it.
Ты ведь веришь, что я существую, Стэнли? Нажми R, чтобы вернуться домой.
Yes, I suppose on closer inspection that it doesn't quite look like your average hardware store bucket. It's just a little more, what am I trying to say? Sturdier, more capable of transporting liquid. Like it would be better at moving an amount of water from one room to another.
Нажми Q, чтобы снова и снова проживать день со мной.
Oh my God, what am I saying? Better at carrying water from room to room. It's a bucket. It's literally just a bucket. Why do I feel some need to point out the ways in which it's so much more than just a regular bucket?
Нажми домой, чтобы пойти домой, на работу, домой, на работу, домой.
Oh no. I'm having feelings for the bucket. No. What's going on? Why do I want to be with the bucket? Hear what the bucket has to say. Do anything it asks.
Okay.
What's wrong with me? I don't understand.
Поздновато ложишься,
Perhaps if I
Стэнли.
had the bucket, this would be less confusing. Yes. The bucket could tell me what to do in this troublesome situation. Stanley, give me the bucket. Give it to me. Give me the bucket, Stanley.
Не-не-не-не-не.
I need it. Give it to me now. Give it
Закрой
or I'll...
глаза. Возвращайся на работу, Стэнли. Окей, забавная концовка. Ой. Это концовка? Или нет?